Dominaria United is bringing tons of new cards and creatures to the Explorer format that we love. And I am going to show you today 7 that I'm predicting are going to shake up the meta. Now there are 2 ways that this can be done. One is obviously a card that can be added to an already existing archetype and either level that up to a higher tier in the meta or just strengthen out the weaknesses, or there is 1 or 2 in here that I actually think could create a brand new archetype, which is extremely exciting. Now let's first start off with number 7. We've actually got a 2-for-1 package deal, but we'll get to that part in a second. We're going to start off by talking about Balmor, the Battle Mage Captain. This is a 1/3 legendary creature, bird, wizard, for just 1 blue and 1 red at 2 mana. Flying, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain trample until end of turn. Now, I think at 2 mana, this is a card that could actually see us find some sort of prowess wizard tribal deck. I really think that is something that could potentially take a little bit of the meta share away from Izzet Arclight Phoenix. That is obviously a great deck, and so this has a lot of challenges to deal with in order to get better than that, but this is just going to put in a lot of work. Now, if you get this thing down for 2 mana, let's say you get a Soulscar Mage down on turn 1, that's turning your instants and sorceries into a lot of damage, and do not overestimate this part where you're gaining trample. Now, as I said, this is a 2-for-1 deal, so this card is actually getting paired with Jaya is a fiery negotiator, 4 mana planeswalker. Now keep in mind, we are considering this along the lines of pairing these two together in an Izzet prowess archetype, and so this card for 4 mana can +1 create a 1/1 red monk creature token with prowess. I just think that's really powerful, and even if this card doesn't find a home in that deck, I think it's a card that potentially could be played in other archetypes as well. Leaving behind a fairly solid creature for a +1 is just really, really valuable. And then also, -1, this card also works really well if you're playing it as the last card in your hand in a more aggressive strategy, which prowess could be. Exile the top 2 cards of your library, choose one of them, you may play that card this turn. So it's card draw, it's creating creatures with prowess, and then that's just the first 2 abilities. It goes even farther. So number 2, it's also removal, so it's extremely flexible. Choose target creature an opponent controls. Whenever you attack this turn, Jaya, Fiery Negotiator, deals damage equal to the number of attacking creatures to that creature. Now imagine you're pairing this with a young Pyromancer, which has created 3 elementals. You swing in just your Pyromancer and 3 elementals, that's already 4 damage. That's going to get rid of a lot of things in the meta right now, and it actually does that on attack, so that creature is now gone for blocking, which I think could work extremely well for this archetype. And then the ultimate, very hard to get to at -8, starting at 4, going up +1, but you get an emblem with whenever you cast a red instant or sorcery spell, copy it twice, you may choose new targets for the copies. So probably will never really get played, but I think prowess could be a deck that we could see, especially adding these 2 new potential cards to the archetype. It could have Ledger Shredder in it, it could have the Soulscar Mage, and it could have the 2 mana Monk that is also pretty good, or it could also lean a little more into Wizard's Tribal. Wizard's Lightning Bolt is a very solid card that we don't really see that much right now in Explorer. So, moving on to number 6, we're going to see Leaf Crowned Visionary. Now, this is a card that is number 6 for a reason. I don't feel extremely confident in this card, but it's another piece for a tribal deck that I think is already pretty decent. If you look on my channel, you can see a very solid showing from a Golgari Elves deck revolving around the 2 mana card that makes elves, and then for 6 mana you can buff it up. The elvish, oh man, War Master, I think. I'm blanking on the name. But this is a pretty solid elves. Other elves you control get +1/+1. We know based on experience that that alone is not enough to make a tribal card good. I mean, look at Blade Stitch Scab. It's doing absolutely nothing for zombies right now. But I think the second ability is actually pretty good. Whenever you cast an elf spell, you may pay 1 green. If you do, draw a card. So one of the problems that I find the elves as a tribe have in Explorer is that they're all small, and so you cast out this big wide board, but now it's turn 4, you've played every creature you control, and yeah, you're maybe a smidge ahead, but then your opponent is able to outvalue you. So this is able to turn all of your cards into cantrips, which for just an extra green mana in an elf deck where you're already trying to spew things out, I think is going to be really, really valuable. Now, I don't think it's going to take elves to the next level. I don't think it's going to actually push them into a top 10 deck, But if they're tier C right now, I think it could bump them up to a B tier, for example. So I think it could elevate them one level, whatever you consider them to be at on the meta share right now. And I'm kind of excited because Elves is just a tribe that's always around and is always fun to play. Now moving on to number 5, we're going to take a look at Astor, Bearer of Blades. Now I really hope that this actually works in Explorer. Astor of Blades, when Astor, Bearer of Blades enters the battlefield, look at the top 7 cards of your library. That is a lot. You may reveal an equipment or vehicle from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any random order. Equipment you control have Equip 1, and vehicles you control have Crew 1. Now, I'm not too interested in that vehicles part just now, but I think equipment you control have Equip 1 might be good enough to bring Hammer Time, a deck revolving around Colossus Hammer, which is played in so many of the so many of the constructed metas that it really is kind of the card that I think could bring Hammer Time to be a real share of the deck. Now, this is replacing the 2-mana card that actually lets you equip cards for free in older formats, so I don't know if it's that good. But Colossus Hammer is pretty insane. So the big question will be if this 4 mana here is too expensive to actually make the deck playable. But I think it has serious potential. Now also, people have already played around with Hammer Time. And there is a spell that lets you equip a warrior with an equipment at its instant speed. So it's in a good tribe. It has a good ability that is reminiscent of an old one that has created an archetype that stood the test of time. And so I think Astor really has a shot to create an actual brand new archetype that we have not seen be successful in Explorer. And I'm extremely excited about it. Now moving on to number 4, we're going to look at Ronus's Vortex. This card is, I think, just so good. So picture this. We already run Fading Hope in a lot of decks, which is bounce a creature. Now, this is a little different. Return target creature or planeswalker you don't control to its owner's hand. Now, that's not as good. Obviously, Fading Hope is good to protect our creatures, but if this spell was kicked, so 4 mana total, because the kicker is 2 and a black. If this spell was kicked, put that permanent on the bottom of its owner's library instead. So this is kind of a combination between the 1 mana black spell that can be kicked for straight up destroy, which some people play, now that's a sorcery, and the Fading Hope. So I think this is extremely good removal. There's also a lot of really good graveyard creatures in the meta right now that this absolutely obliterates. So hitting a Greasefang with this or hitting a Kroxa with this is big bonus. And I think this deck, or this card, will absolutely see play. Now, the biggest question for this card. So I think this fits much better, obviously, in a control kind of deck, but blue-black control is kind of a hanging around archetype that just isn't quite as good as Azorius control. Now, the biggest problem is I don't think this is actually going to be enough to push that deck over the top and take over Azorius's control position, but who knows? This is a very good card. Returning something to the bottom of the library is basically the best thing you can do. It's right up there with exiling, and having the flexibility to have it on turn 1 in case you're getting aggroed out is really good. So I think this deck is going to be pretty strong, or this card is going to be pretty strong, and we're definitely going to be seeing it at some point in the Explorer meta. Now, moving right along up to card number 3, let's see. Temporary Lockdown. Oh my gosh, Control is just getting so many tools. For 1 white. When Temporary Lockdown enters the battlefield, exile each non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less until Temporary Lockdown leaves the battlefield. Now, this might be a sideboard card, but even if it is, this card is so incredible in the right matchups. I mean, picture that you're playing against mono red aggro. They are on the play. They play down their Kumano faces Kakazan, and then turn 2, they put down a Burning Tree Emissary, which leads into let's say 2-drop, a Viashino Pyromancer. Turn 3, they play another creature and flip their Kumano. So now they've got 5 creatures out. They deal some damage, you're holding them off, but then all of a sudden you play 1 Temporary Lockdown, and this gets rid of all 5 of their play. So this card is just absolutely insanely good against any super aggressive strategy. It's also pretty good against the life gain decks as well, because those play so many low to the ground, and it's every non-land permanent. So this can hit those cleric classes. These can hit those pesky enchantments and artifacts that come down on turn 1 and turn 2. And I just think Temporary Lockdown is going to find some share in the meta in these decks. Azorius Control is already very good. I don't think they'll play a whole playset, but 1 or 2 of these definitely seems reasonable in any controlling deck. And I just think it's going to be so good. But we'll see. Now, moving right along to number 2, we're getting very excited about these cards. Number 2, we're going to take a look at Liliana of the Veil, this classic Planeswalker. I've actually never played with Liliana, but as I'm listening to people that know how the card works and have played it in older formats, it's just a really powerful card. So 3 mana is the big key for Liliana. Powerful Planeswalkers on turn 3 is just a really good value. So +1, each player discards a card. I think this is one of the reasons Liliana is so good, is because it already works with a bunch of strategies that are already good in Explorer. So this is not going to create any new metas, but picture this in any of the Rakdos decks where you want to be throwing things into the grave, like a Kroxa, like a Cauldron Familiar, or picture it in Greasefang as well. I think this is a big boost for Greasefang. It's an improvement on some of the discard outlets we have. And then -2, target player sacrifices a creature. Just generically good removal, can take care of so many things. Obviously, it's not perfect removal because they're sacrificing, but it's a lot of value, and the play pattern on this thing is going to be very good. And then an actually achievable ultimate, -6, separate all permanents target player controls into 2 piles. That player sacrifices all permanents in the pile of their choice. So that includes lands. That's basically a game-winning style ultimate right there that isn't actually impossible if you've got some pressure on and they can't get rid of Liliana. So I think Liliana is an old classic card that people have seen success with in the past. They know what they're doing. They know that this card's going to be good, and we're going to see it again in probably what I think you could argue is already the best color, is another reason that I think Liliana of the Veil will certainly see play on some level in Explorer, and I think it'll see a lot of play. Even though it's not creating anything new, it's bolstering in powerful ways archetypes that are already near the top of the ladder. Now let's go ahead and jump up to our number 1 prediction, which is going to be the Serra Paragon. This is a 4 mana 3/4 angel with flying. Now, that already is okay, but its ability is so good, guys. Once during each of your turns, you may play a land from your graveyard or cast a permanent spell with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard. If you do, it gains when this permanent is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, exile it, and you gain 2 life. I think the biggest reason that this is going to be a major player is that Collected Company Angels is already a pretty real deck in Arena, and this card boosts it at the stage of the game where I feel that it's weakest. I think turns 1 through 3, you're getting out Giada, you're getting out your Righteous Valkyries. Those plays are really big, but it's really looking for a top end to help it seal the deal on those games where it goes a little too long. And I think Serra Paragon is exactly that. So you picture this. You play out your first 3 spells. You play out some 1-drop like a Cleric class or something that cares about whatever. And then you follow it up with the Giada and the Righteous Valkyrie. And then you get Wrathed, and they wrath the board. Now, the board is clear. You play out Serra Paragon. Maybe you're able to bring a land back. But then after that, you're going to get so much value every single turn getting to revive something. It's almost drawing you a card. It's like a baby Sun Titan if you've ever played that card, because you can get those lands back. Probably not going to happen that often, but lands could be altered so that the deck has more lands that can go in there. Maybe you run 4 copies of the land that destroys things, and so that you can actually bring that back every turn. That seems really, really good. I think Serra Paragon is going to be the best card for Explorer out of Dominaria United. If you're watching this in the future, you can let me know if I was crazy or way wrong, but I just think it's an incredible card in a deck that's already very powerful, and so that's why I think Serra Paragon is going to take it to the next level. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. I hope you enjoy playing with these cards once we get them. Other than that, you have a great day, my friend.